When I look back at the long trajectory of the Lazaris material, I have a mixed reaction, meaning I think there was and remains an enormous amount of lying by omission by Lazaris. And that missing large chunk of data leads, I think, in a probability field to shame, to confusion, to frustration, to disappointment. And I'm not sure how much of the growth and well-being offsets that, because there's a wonderful fairy tale about putting salt on a magpie's tail. A young boy has a dream, and the myth is that if you can put a little bit of salt on a magpie's tail, then the magpie will grant your wish. And what the magpie does is says, you have to do this, and you have to do that, you have to do this, and you have to do this. You have to accomplish all these things, and then I'll let you put some salt on my tail. And the boy does all those things, but the magpie now has a new list of requirements. If you do this, if you do that, if you do these other things, then I will let you put some salt on my tail. And so the young man, it takes some years to do all of this. We're talking about clearing a forest, building a house, all these different things. So eventually he comes back to the magpie and says, look, I've done this, and now I want to put some salt on your tail. And the magpie gives a final assignment, like if you do this and this and this and this, then you can put salt on my tail and I will grant you your wish. He's become a man at this point and goes through and does all this stuff and goes to find the magpie. And the magpie says, look, you don't need me. You don't need magic. Look at what you've accomplished. Look at all that you've done. Putting salt on my tail, and I'm much less powerful than you are. You could do all this on your own. And now you've got a house, you've got this, you've got a lovely family, so what's left to wish for? And the question is, like, should the magpie, right, in this story, should the magpie have just said, I've got shit, you're wasting your time, right? Put some salt on my tail and, make a wish, but, I can't make your dreams come true. Would that have been a more ethical path for the magpie? So that's the question, right? And it is interesting that people will go on these extraordinary quests if they think that there's, a guarantee, some absolute, some water of life, some grail at the end. They'll do all these tremendous things. And yet usually they're searching for something, because they're putting the power out there. Now, if we look, if we take this analogy and overlay it on the Lazaris material, Lazaris starts out with you create your own reality. No ifs, no ands, no buts. You create it all. Everything out there is an illusion, right? Made by your beliefs, this, that, the other. And all you have to do is do this little thing and you will have the reality you want. And if you didn't want it, it's because you didn't, or you had payoffs. And all you have to do is let go of those payoffs, and, well, you can have the reality that you've always been creating. And so, off you go. And, over the decades, people went and tried this and tried that, and, there's a little bit of success here, a little bit of that, but clearly it's not the full picture. So they come back and it's like, well, now you have this negative ego, right? And your negative ego is trying to destroy it, right? But if you can just bust your negative ego and stuff, then, right, then you can create your reality with your beliefs and, this and that. And so it goes, right? So that magpie story, it's, it starts off with negative ego, then you work with fears, then you work with pain, then you work with 4 levels of shame, then you deal with codependency, then you do this, then you do that, then you make allies, then you after all this, right? Oh, by the way, there's your shadow, then there's this, then there's that. And so Lazaris just keeps iterating. And now there's this, and now there's that. So where the dishonesty or the lie of omission comes in is you kind of think about this like when Elon Musk talked about starting a company and should you start a company. He didn't say, yes, follow your passion, do your dream, etc. He said, no. Starting a big endeavor like this is like eating glass and staring into the abyss, number one. Number two, right? You shouldn't start a company unless what you're starting is really better than existing companies. And 3, that, you're doing it perhaps out of a compulsion or you really want to go at it, and the odds are high of failure, which they are. 90% of new business ventures fail within 10 years. Right? So you got a 10% success rate. So if you're willing to do that and go through that period and, make the various sacrifices, fine, then start a company. But don't do it otherwise, right? Don't just be an employee. And that's with kind of 90% odds. Now, the equivalent would be Lazaris, telling people as he's first channeling, etc., look, we're going to channel for some 40 or 50 years, I don't know, maybe 60, we're going to be doing that. And in that period, we'll be talking with, however many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. And 98% of all the people that come in contact with the Lazaris material, they'll listen to tape, little whatever, and they're all just going to go on to other things. But those that remain or work more deeply with the material, we're going to introduce crystals, and some of you are going to spend tens of thousands of dollars buying our crystals. We're going to put out thousands of hours of material, and we'll have 7-step processes for all of it. And at the end of it, there's going to be a good chunk, let's say 30 to 50% of all the people kind of working with this, that just kind of feel ashamed or that they're doing something wrong because they're doing all this stuff, but they don't feel that great, or the reality isn't that great, right? And the new age and all that we're talking about, it includes Trump and it includes Biden, and it includes the degradation of our media and the slow decline of the U.S. economy for the majority of people. And that's what when we say the new world, we're talking about that, working longer hours, lower earning power for the average person, not just in the economy at all, but the average person that works with us, right? And, there's going to be school shootings, that's what 2012 and after that's kind of what it looks like. And you could possibly have an influence in that or change this or that, but that's what the probability field is kind of leaning towards. And when we talk about a new human being, we're not talking about it in 2015 or whatever. We're actually, which we'll tell you later, we're talking about that, over the next 60,000 years or, whatever it is. And so who's with us, right? Who's going to start this kind of process? And, and over that period, you'll pay tens of thousands of dollars to Concept Synergy to be friends with us. And your relationship statistically is not going to work out very well. And it may even be worse, right? Quoting metaphysics back and forth and all that kind of dynamic. So that's the way it is. And it's just going to keep going on, right? There's going to be this and then that. And there's going to be so many techniques out there that you couldn't even complete them all in a year. Like if you just did all of our techniques once, you couldn't fit them into a year. And we're not going to tell you when to stop doing them. We're going to tell you that each one is really, really vital to your growth. That you've got it's imperative, right? And we're not going to tell you to stop doing that or stop doing that. We're just keep up with a new technique that's absolutely imperative. And your life may not look any better than anyone else in your neighborhood. It may not be any better. You may be the most miserable person in your neighborhood, either because all these techniques didn't work or you feel like a failed metaphysician where nobody else believed in that to begin with. And that's the statistics. And maybe 1% or 2% of our friends will have a substantial. That's the statistical probability. If you do all this, that 1 to 2% are going to get it and, have these experiences. But it's not going to be Penny, and it's not going to be the staff at Concept Synergy, right? They're all going to have, horrific employment experiences and awkward or miserable deaths, filled with this and that. That's what it is, right? And we're not going to ever really kind of clue that in. We'll just keep selling you, workshops and events. Now, the question is, how many people would sign up for that, right? And it's a little bit like the relationship question, right? I'm going to tell you how beautiful you are and how this and that. But, once you're pregnant, then, I'm going to have second thoughts and going to go sleep with your best friend and do this and do that and who's in for that, right? It's but the really ethical people and companies do go through that, and it's not an easy sell, right? I remember when I met my wife, who I wasn't thinking would, end up being my wife. But I said, look, I've got PTSD. I'm depressed. I'm in one of my worst possible moments. I'm not sure where that's going because I've just kind of learning about that paradigm. I'm impatient. I'm critical. I've got a lot of reactivity, on that. And so this is probably going to be quite difficult, maybe even hellish. But the good news is it's the lowest point in my life, right? So if I'm stayed alive, it's probably going to get better. And so if this is a relationship dynamic where you and I are both better off while we're together, and we're both learning and growing more than we would be alone, and we can both endure the pain, loneliness, misery, and all that comes with PTSD and traumatic memories emerging from childhood, then it only gets better from here, right? And by the way, the statistical odds of this lasting a long time are, 3% based on my history. And so, and if it does collapse, I can't be friends with lovers. There's too much attachment trauma around that. And so, I could be a good mentor or a growth buddy or, a friend from afar more sustainably than I could be, a great romantic partner. And so I told her all that in a very neutral tone and with no praise or effusion, because that's what a friend does. A friend wants the best for you, right? And I wasn't sure that being romantically involved was best for her. But I was sure that being a supportive mentor was great for her. So, I waited a while to even offer the possibility and, oversold the downside, because I hate being oversold and, scammed in, you're going to get this fitness thing and you're going to get a positive attitude and you're going to become fit and healthy and you're going to gain because you spent $300 on this exercise machine that clutters up the room. I mean, it's not what a friend would do, right? A friend would say, don't go to Vegas. You might make a big winning, but 98% of the people who go to Vegas and place 100 bets come out with none of their money, or certainly less than they arrived with. So don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do the thing where 98%, instead buy some real estate, because 90% of the people who buy and hold real estate for 30 years have more money, right? So 98% or 99% of the people who go to Vegas come out with less money. 90% of the people that buy and hold real estate come out with more money, right? So follow the probability field that works. Now, fortunately for both my wife and I, it was the low point in my, in my life in terms of both well-being and kind of logistical hell, physiological hell. And we both learned and grew and supported each other through that traumatic territory. And so, beating those odds in all those ways. But there's never once been a moment when I've under-delivered anything that I've said, whether it was a marriage vow or this or that. I like under-promising and over-delivering. And so, there have been areas that she's broken trust and hasn't delivered in areas that she stated that she would, because, well, for whatever reasons, but there's no instance where I've done that. And I do notice that most people won't take that deal. I will, because I know the statistics, and I know that it's a very unusual person who will give those statistics in a way that benefits me by looking at all the negative stuff that could happen, and not hyperselling, the positive, right? Because that's disillusioning. It's lonely, right? When someone sells you a bag of shit and talks about how all this wonderful stuff is going to happen, it's lonely because you realize they lied to you, or they're too dumb to understand that they lied to you. Either way, you're alone, right? And usually it's for their benefit in some way. Now, I look at this with kind of some ambivalence. And the reason for that is I think that my life is better because I encountered Lazaris than if I hadn't. Right? So that's one thing. Now, the same is true with most relationships. Most people are better in a relationship than alone, right? So that's the case. So, I'm very anti-lies and anti, I guess, in over-promising hype and all that, because I've never enjoyed it. But also, I don't enjoy the thought of someone being confused and angry with me because I said I would do all this stuff and then I only did half. And so I'd rather say that I do half, right? And so that's a really big thing for me. And I also found the pain of all the betrayals on a parental level, of being promised these things for expedient purposes and then not doing them, not carrying through, again, for expedient purposes. Let's promise a bribe, and then it's even more efficient if we don't have to pay it, right? It's wonderful. And so that always played a big part in the isolation, in the smallness, in the unworthiness that I felt as a child, right? These people care about themselves and their honor so little, that they would lie so easily. And yet a child always internalizes that to say that, well, there must be something unworthy about me that they would care so little about me. So, I've made a big point of that. Now, the vast majority of women will choose lies over that kind of candor. And that is a mistake, right? Because a friend is looking out for what's best for you and wants you to be informed and a partner in the full probability field. That's what a friend wants. A lust wants to get into someone's pants and is not all that worried about expediency, right? A need, I need you, right? That's where, I need you. But the friend is saying, what's good for you around this? And let's give you an accurate set of data. So I think that has worked for me. I would say that in the times that I have been alone, that candor has not worked for women who would have gladly been with me and done well by being with me if they had if I had shown the upside more than the downside. I'd usually like to show the downside more than the upside, but also just try and neutrally present statistics and just make sure that this and this and this and this is all kind of fully disclosed. Because I think relationships are generally good with all that downside. And I think it's incredibly healthy if a person can look at all the downside and say, well, I'm going to work really hard to make sure that that doesn't happen as much and go for the upside. I think that's, a position of confidence and strength. But a lot of people don't have that. In other words, if I project that same dynamic on Lazaris, my expectation is that just as the vast majority of people will not sign up for a relationship with a really accurate statistically probability field laid out there, that a lot of people would not have signed up for Lazaris. Now, that could have included me. I don't know. I was 12. I don't think it would have, because the earth energy, earth power didn't overpromise too much. But that kind of began the relationship. So I don't think that would have included me. And I think I would have felt much more engaged in the relationship if the presentation was not like 10 times disconnected with reality, right? So, feeling suicidal, listening to my parents fight, feeling helpless and traumatized, and hearing Lazaris talk about, you can have it all and it's easier to succeed than it is to fail and all this stuff, was not, very connecting with reality. And so is somewhat dissociative as opposed to, dialogue rather than monologue and all of this type of stuff. And so, I know that general practice, if you want to woo someone or court someone, is you put your best foot forward. That's, again, not me. I took my last client to several of my recent jobs, and I highlighted our mistakes. I said, look at the mistake I made here, and look at the mistake I made here, and look at the mistake I made here. Now, this is a terrific job, right? But don't think I'm perfect. And if you can't deal with what that should be telling you, which is that there will be mistakes of some kind here. And I also discussed the conflicts I had with each of the clients, right? This one is this one is this one is this, right? 80% of people recommend me, 20% their negatives outweigh the positives in their mind, right? So the statistics. Because I think there's enough feeling of betrayal in the world to, not to leave room for that. People have enough of that going on for themselves. So, I just don't want to play into that story and that dynamic that so many people are identifying with because they've experienced it so many times. So I would say that I would prefer and wish that Lazaris was, I would say, about 300% less hypey. Talking the new world, the new age, the most important decade in the history of humanity. I mean, think of someone born 1 million years from now and saying, yeah, 1 million years ago, wait, we can't even remember it. But that was the important time, not now, right? There's just so much hype. And I think it did sell chairs and all of that. But I also think it has contributed to the massive decline, right? Lazaris's awareness in the culture and popularity is lower today than 30 years ago, right? It's probably peaking in the 80s. Maybe that's why he thinks that's the most important decade, is, we're doing well here, right? But for that to be, a really sustainable relationship, the techniques have to work better than other techniques. And in many cases, they don't, particularly when we're dealing with trauma and PTSD, which, as it turns out, is a huge foundation for most of our cultures or our cult's ills and most of our individual challenges. And that remains a massive blind spot. Lazaris is not dealing with trauma and PTSD competently or addressing how big its impact is. And, Lazaris is correct that saying complexity correlates with ease. But rather than going into the complexity of the IFS, Internal Family Systems model, which, you've got managers, you've got firefighters, you've got dissociated, traumatized parts, you've got the self, you've got the ego, you've got, various protectors doing different strategies, you've got different ages. That is a complex model, and it is incredibly powerful. Rather than do that, Lazaris just split it into you and your negative ego, which is a dualistic model, and it's very simple. Right? Everything that's wrong is your negative ego, and the rest is wonderful, right? Your ego is your enemy and all that. It's very simple, and it doesn't work, right? And so, you got all this vast complexity of ongoing techniques, and yet this very, very simple model. And it doesn't work. It isn't easy. It doesn't work very well. As numbers of people with decades of experience with Lazaris will attest to, or their realities will attest to. So I think Lazaris is dishonest if we give Lazaris credibility for having all this seeing and all this stuff. I think Lazaris talks about truth and honesty taking account for feelings. That's a little bit, if we use Lazaris's thing of accounting for people's feelings, and revealing the truths that account for people's feelings. And we look at the fact that, at least in my case, I think my life is better because of my relationship with Lazaris than not. Then maybe withholding all that truth accounts for people's feelings, i.e. that a number of people's lives would be better as a result of engaging with Lazaris, and most people too short-sighted to, to do that. But, Lazaris there can't have it both ways, right? Because there's schizophrenia there. Because on the one hand, Lazaris says, don't sell yourself short, don't do this, don't do that, right? But if Lazaris doesn't tell you the truth because you're too short-centered, too self-centered, you're too short-sighted, you're too greedy, you're too this, and you want a quick fix, so we're going to pretend to give it to you, then who's believing in the short-sightedness, the self-centeredness, and the expediency of their friends? Lazaris is, right? If you really believe that people are interested and ready for the long term, then you say something like, we're going to explore a large number of ideas. On aggregate, most of the people's outer reality is not going to be better than anyone else's. And if you spend all your money on crystals and stuff like that, they may not be as good. It's going to be very disappointing and bitter and frustrating, where your reality is going. And whether you do our techniques or not, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But there will be a lot of growth. There will be a lot of awareness. We'll have fun together at times. And, some of our techniques won't work. Try a large number of techniques and use the ones that work well, and use other people's techniques when they work well. And we'd like to have more dialogue, and we're going to keep track of statistics of where we're really helping and where we're not, and from your perspective and from our perspective, and we'll have a real dialogue. I'd much prefer that. And so, and I think that type of thing would grow, right? I think the people are hungry for that, and that type of thing would grow rather than have this spike up in the 80s, and then when obviously so many of these techniques have not worked in any sustainable way, then there wouldn't be this big taper off, because first people shame themselves and feel, confused, whatever, and then they just dissociate from Lazaris. That's what I did for over a decade. And then I found the ability through this channel largely to kind of piece together and say, no, this bit works, that's good. Lazaris doesn't want to hear what I have to say or answer my questions. Okay, well, I can still have a conversation and work through my own thoughts in front of a camera. And, Lazaris is free to do what they want to do, just like everyone else is.